Hi, I'm Barbara, and we're going to be discussing the Navajo Indian culture with you today. So, archaeological evidence places Navajos in northwestern New Mexico by the late 14 to early 1500s. And the Navajo culture was heavily influenced by the Pueblos in this area and likely influenced changes to the Navajos, such as clan formation and agriculture, which led to the gradual adopting of a less nomadic lifestyle, and trades such as pottery making, silversmith, and weaving, which produced the unmistakable product of the people, the Navajo blanket. The Navajos live freely on the land of their forefathers, which is located between what they call the four sacred mountains. These mountains are located in Colorado east and north, New Mexico, and Arizona. These mountains have deep significance and historical meaning to the Navajo, as they are historically considered the cardinal boundary peaks surrounding their country. Even today, the Navajo believe the four sacred mountains were gifts from the holy people. Therefore, traditions, prayers, songs, and sacred trust are embodied in these mountains. One of the most significant periods in history occurred in 1864, when 9,000 Navajos were captured in Arizona and forced to journey to Fort Sumner in New Mexico. This journey is known in Navajo history as the Long Walk, and during their confinement at Fort Sumner, more than 2,000 Navajo men, women, and children died of respiratory tract disease, GI disorders, and exhaustion. A significant treaty was signed in 1868 that led to their release from Fort Sumner, and the Navajos were able to move back towards the four sacred mountains and establish their first reservation in Arizona and began to develop a diversified economy. Life today, post-Fort Sumner, the Navajo population began to see a spectacular growth, and in 1870 they had a population of 15,000. Today, the Navajo population continues to grow and is the largest tribe in the United States population of 362,000. According to the 2010 census, among the population, they are dominated by those under the age of 18 years, with a median age of 28, with comparison that to the U.S. population, which is 36 and a half years old. Women outnumber men at 51%, 51.5%, and with regards to education, 27.9% have less than a high school diploma, and 32% with a high school diploma, and 31% with some college education or associate's degree, and only 6% with a bachelor's degree. Today, many American Indians remain on reservations and in rural areas. An equal number, however, do reside in cities such as Oklahoma, California, New Mexico, and Alaska. Current median family income for American Indians in 2013 was $27,400 compared to $62,400 for the U.S. white population. And lastly, the Navajo tribe obtains revenue from oil, coal, uranium, and federal grants and contracts. However, high unemployment rates continue to be a major problem among the Navajo Nation.
Hi, my name is Jillian, and today I'll be discussing with you communication in space as it relates to the Navajo culture. So the language that's spoken by the Navajo peoples is classified as Athapascan, and this is because it originally came from the people groups of Lake Athabasca in northwestern Canada. This language is very similar to that is spoken in Alaska and the northwest Pacific coast. Interestingly, only 39.2% of the Navajo peoples speak English at home, and 60.7% speak a language other than English in the home. The Navajos use tonal speech, and pitch is very important to them, which adds to the meaning of their dialogue. They also interchange vowels, which give several meanings to the same word. So this can be kind of tricky for those those who are not familiar with the language. The Navajos, most of the sentences that they use in most of their dialogue, there's this concept of good that's present throughout, and the word good is often seen as anything desirable or favorable. So this could mean, good could mean beautiful, attractive, agreeable, so this is something to keep in mind. Today, many Navajos are fluent in both English and their native language. And the Navajo language was actually unwritten until recently, when in World War II, Navajos were actually code talkers because their language was so different, and the enemy could not understand it. So it was saved numerous lives through that time of history. In terms of nonverbal communication, the Navajos will greet each other by extending a hand, very similar to a handshake, and the other individual will reach out and just lightly touch their hand, and this is their form of greeting. And also, there exists a taboo among the Navajo peoples in that they will not touch a deceased individual or anything that belonged to that individual, and also any animal that was struck by lightning, which I found very interesting. An animal that died of natural causes doesn't fall into this category. It was just the lightning specifically. Initial meetings with the Navajo people are not, they will often remain silent and reserved until some time has passed and they become more familiar. And to honor the ancestors, it is often seen that tribe members will be introduced using the clan name and location in addition to the birth name, and this is common. Eye contact is avoided as it's considered a sign of disrespect, and pointing of any kind, even with an end of a pointing object, is considered insulting as well. The implications this has for nursing is we always want to provide a translator, and that's to ensure accurate translation of information. The first encounter is not always used to deal with official business, so we want to keep that in mind as well as this develops rapport. This is a time to become familiar with each other, so that's the first encounter with the patient, which is not always easy in the hospital. And then some nurses of the Navajo culture have a difficult time providing post-mortem care due to the taboo that exists. And oftentimes you'll see them performing a healing ritual once that has been completed to cleanse themselves. So now moving on to space. There's no such thing as imaginary space in the Navajo culture, and time and space are interconnected. The book uses an example, the space of a small room or house is that of a small universe, so they're seen as one and the same. There's no differentiation between the two. And there's a belief that shared space provides spiritual security and trust. The Navajo live in dwellings called hugins, and this is a round open room where numerous individuals will sleep and live. So it's a communal living space. When there is a death in a hugin, they will close the door and notify others, which is a warning for them to stay away, and oftentimes they'll be burned or abandoned. The space of the hugin is actually extremely important, and numerous rituals and ceremonies are performed in the hugin. And they're often crowded, so numerous individuals will live in one hugin, but miles will be between one hugin to another. This has numerous nursing implications because there are no imaginary borders, and personal space is important to these patients. So they have a difficult time with the imaginary space of a personal border. And so it's important to make sure that they're oriented to the unfamiliar space and personal space is respected. We also want to be culturally sensitive to the fact that new foods, treatments, and settings are obviously difficult to adjust to. Hugins, we need to keep in mind that hugins and close living quarters increase the risk for infection, and they often lack indoor plumbing, clean water, and there are often numerous burns from the indoor fires because they not only have a fire to keep warm, but the numerous cooking fires that happen inside the hugin. There are also nutritional deficiencies, which you will hear more later about, but they're often seen due to a lack of food in general and a proper food storage as well. And lastly, distance between the hugins makes medical treatment very difficult because there are individuals that go out and provide health care, but the delivery is difficult because there's such far distance between and there's a lack of transportation.
Time in the Navajo is in the present, right now. Some bit past tense stuff, but that's just history. They're very connected to nature. Some perceive to be subjugated to nature, but most feel that being in harmony with nature was a better depiction of how they feel. So we have to implement this into nursing by, it's very difficult to set things up for future appointments. It's hard to tell them to do something in the future because they're very present based. And they also, this is a really weird concept, but like they base their meals off if they're hungry right now. So for one day they can have 5 meals, and the next day they won't eat at all just because they're not hungry. 2 meals the next day, and so forth. It's just a little different. So when you're trying to give medications to them and saying, oh, eat this with your meals, it's a little different because they don't eat meals on a regular basis. Like you take your pill 3 times a day, once before, Anyways, you get the picture. Yeah, it's very hard to set up appointments. So next slide. So the social organization, this is based on family only. It's very family based. The whole family. I'm talking about cousins, their aunts, their uncles, grandma, we're a big whole family. And it's very matriarchal. So like the husband goes with the wife's family, and that's that. No questions asked. Sorry, guys. So the group decides on things. In some cases, the male, will present a problem, but the group will decide on what they want to do with that. So if you don't have relatives, let's say your families die in a terrible war, whatever, you are considered poor in this culture because family is everything to them. So the mother works on the inside, does the domestic stuff, cooking, cleaning, same old, same old. The father provides for the family, whether it's farming or just work. And the children help out in both aspects. There's no children doing just this or this. They help both parents out. And an interesting thing is that parenting is a little bit different. In our culture, we tell our kids, don't do that. But in this parenting, they tell them the consequences and not what not to do. So they'll say, like, if you do that, this will happen. Or if you do this, this will happen. And applying this to nursing is important. You have to treat the whole family because it's so very important. So if one person is sick, you have to treat the whole family as if. So if someone has diabetes, then you have to change their diet. You have to change the whole diet for the whole family because that's how it's run. While they're staying in the hospital, it's best just to let the whole family in. The whole kit and caboodle is let them in. They'll heal faster. They'll get out quicker. And it's best practice for most healing. And cousins are like brothers and sisters, like I said. Thanks.
What's up, guys? So we're gonna start with environmental control. So the Navajo people, they're considered to have a mixed and external locus. They're considered both being oriented and doing oriented. They really focus on harmony with nature and the environment and the factors that play into. So nursing implications. It's pretty simple. Just be aware, have team awareness. Realize that the Navajo Indians believe that balance is very important with the environment, and then seek to appropriately integrate the Navajo healers. So health and religion are linked in the Navajo, so don't even try to separate that. Traditional religion and healing ceremonies are tightly linked. Importance of understanding the blessing way, so that's their philosophy derived from 35 major and minor ceremonial variations. That's where they come from. So the Navajo practice of the blessing way, it attempts to remove illness through means of stories, songs, rituals, prayers, symbols, and my personal favorite, sand paintings. So in the blessing way ceremony, the importance of family and clan members is really emphasized in the healing process. So implications and interventions, seek to understand the blessing way if you're taking care of somebody with the Navajo. Recognize the importance of having the family members involved. Understand the role and type of the healers, so there are different types of Navajo healers, be aware of that. And determine which cultural health practices are seen as helpful to the client. Always educate and respect them. So comparing and contrasting the worldview, the main thing is just being aware that there are healers involved with the Navajo, and that their main focus is having the family integrated with the healing process, and then also remembering that being like in connection with the environment is what they're seeking and what they're going for. So, holistic and folk measures, you have, I'm just going to go over the three healers. You have the diagnostician, so that's a person that will diagnose their illness, whatever they consider their illness to be. They have the singers, those who perform and direct the elaborate and complex healing ceremonies. And then you have the herbalists, whatever they're making for those people. They're specialized practitioners who use herbs to treat patients, but they may also diagnose illnesses. So, next one. All right, implications and interventions. The Indian Health Service and the traditional Navajo healers have made great efforts to work together in the healing process of traditional Navajo, so that's great. Allowing medicine men and women to perform rituals on the patient as long as there is no negative effects is very important to remember as a nurse. So, like, spreading cornmeal around their bed, like, if there's not a problem with that, that's weird, but let them do it, you know. And then respect the need for Navajo people to maintain traditional rituals even when hospitalized, if possible.
Hi, my name is Crystal, and I'm going to talk to you today about the health disparities, life expectancy and death rates, as well as biological variations of the Navajos. So first, health disparities. Many American Indians are faced with a number of health-related problems. It's even estimated that at least a third live in an absolute state of poverty. And because of this poverty, the compounded problems of lost skills and economic endeavors and the increased complexity of diseases, that all translate into a health-related crisis. So life expectancy and death rates, they have the highest infant mortality rate when compared to the rest of the population, which is 8.3 per 1,000 compared to 6.15. They also have infant, child, and youth death rates that are disproportionately high. And their life expectancy still lags behind the national average behind all other races. Even their leading causes of death varies, as you can see. I have the American Indians on the right and Caucasians on the left. So next on to biological variations, body size and structure. It's well known that people differ culturally. What's less understood and recognized are the biological variations that occur within the various racial groups. Knowing the scientific facts about biological variations can aid the nurse in giving culturally appropriate health care. The first biological variation, and that's the most noticeable, is going to be body size and structure. So they tend to have a low length for age and high weight for length measures for the children. And basically that all points to a high prevalence of obesity. This obesity indicates that there's probably a suboptimal nutrition status, which is possibly linked to the persistent effects of IUGR and low birth weights. So now other visible characteristics that we see are Mongolian spots. They're very common. In fact, they're about 80% is going to be very obvious in the Navajos. And they're typically found on the buttocks and back, occasionally on the abdomen, thighs, and arms. They are very frequently mistaken for child abuse, so it's very important for the nurse and all healthcare providers to be able to recognize the difference. Also, we have cleft uvulas, and this is actually rather startling, and I've never seen it before up until this. So basically, it's considered pretty rare, but up to 18% of American Indians do have this, or some variation. So you can see it gets the appearance of a fishtail where it starts to divide into two. It can be completely divided and look like two completely separate uvulas. So next, we're going to talk about enzymes and nutritional preferences. So for lactose intolerance, it's very prevalent. In fact, 79% are affected. So obviously milk is not a preferred staple in their diet, but that contributes to a protein malnutrition in the Navajos. And then as far as food preference, it gets a little tricky because there's so many different tribes, and all of that is going to be based off of their tribal beliefs, practices, geographical location, and then the local availability of their selected foods. So most of the diets are going to be a combination of food that's indigenous as well as modern processed foods. A lot of them lean towards game and fish, but again, that is based upon what's actually available in the area. And they all believe fruits, berries, roots, and wild greens are very important, but again, are scarce on federally defined Indian regions. They also tend to eat meat and blue cornmeal, beans, squash, and so when you look at their diet, they are typically below the recommended daily allowance in calcium, phosphorus, iron, and vitamin A. and then their fat intake was primarily saturated, and their fiber was lower than the average. So next we're going to talk about alcohol. They metabolize alcohol differently than Caucasians and other races. So basically, because of the enzyme that they possess, they actually metabolize it faster, which is what causes the circulatory and unpleasant effects that they have, which is facial flushing and palpitations. And they also have a higher incidence of alcoholism. They have a lot of different susceptibilities to various diseases. We know that TB is obviously very prevalent among the American Indians. In fact, it's 7 to 15 times higher than non-Indians. We know that socioeconomic factors relate to this, but there's also believed to be an ethnicity factor that's also considered when you're talking about the Navajo. Type 2 diabetes is a major health problem for the Navajos. It's uncertain as to why, but some say they have a predisposition for diabetes. They actually have an earlier onset, and that leads to earlier complications and morbidity. Other diseases we see is hypertension. They actually have a drug-resistant Shigella. Their MI rates are also increased, and usually you see a lot of comorbidities with that. They have a higher prevalence of arthritis, twice the rate of gonorrhea and syphilis morbidity, a higher incidence of Hep B. They also have a higher use of intravenous methamphetamine use, and they have a higher rate of HIV. And then colorectal cancer really strikes them hard because they're less likely to be diagnosed because they don't seek out diagnostic tests when they're supposed to. And then finally, when we talk about all of this, we want to think about implications for nursing and interventions. So there's many implications that the nurse can do to meet the needs. First and foremost is education. So when we think of education, we want to educate our patients, but more importantly, we want to educate ourselves so that we are aware of the differences. So for example, when we talk about the diets, we want to make sure that their trays come in and they're adequate in protein, calcium, and vitamins A and C because that's where they typically have a deficiency. Also, we want to make sure and not have anything that contains lactose on their plates because the prevalence is so high for lactose intolerance. And then we want to make sure that they're getting good protein sources as well as calcium since they cannot take milk and milk products. And then also, when we talk about it, we want to educate the Navajos themselves because there is so many different disease susceptibilities and changes in alcohol metabolism. The more they know, the better that they can act and be proactive in their lives to take care of this. So anyway, thank you so much. Here are our references. Have a good day.